I'm going to take epic monster descriptions from the Bible, creating concept art, and then over to sculpture, carving out the real-life intimate details of creatures as they were exactly described in the original text. It's about to get biblical. Behold, I say unto you, this video is not religious and it's not anti-religious. This isn't even the Bible, it's Webster's New International Dictionary. Suffice it to say that the actual Bible has a lot of creatures in it, some really fantastical. So I'm going to get started with one that you've definitely heard the name of before, but what is the Leviathan? His sneezings flash forth light and his eyes are like eyelids of the dawn. Sparks of fire leap forth out of his nostrils, come forth smoke. His breath kindles coals and a flame comes from his mouth. That is like 10 sentences to say that this thing breathes fire. We get it. The Bible alludes to the Leviathan as a strong, armor-plated sea creature with a lot of teeth. It's described as leaving a trench in the mud when it walks on land and is powerful enough to churn up the sea. So this is a deep sea dwelling and surface dwelling monster. It can frolic, it can walk, so it's got limbs, but otherwise it's really described as very serpentine. Isaiah 21 calls the Leviathan a gliding, coiling serpent and says that God will one day kill it with a great sword. This is an epic creature, one that God's taking on. In the end, I have a design that I think looks really cool, and again, it's very rough conceptually, but this is the one that I want to sculpt because it just feels unseen, but at the same time familiar, and I want to lean into that and make something really gnarly, like an epic creature concept sculpt for a movie or a game. So let's build an armature. Now I have a basic reference. I'm going to expand out from here and do more of the body, but not all of the body. I am going to have the Leviathan emerging out from the water, but it's also described as very sea serpenty. So I want to convey that with the other parts of the body that are also showing out of the water. This is going to be like a clay sculpture that looks like it's coming out of whatever surface it's sitting on, which I think will be pretty cool. So launching into the armature, that means I'm basically making a few armatures so I can position them in a way that shows that serpent coming out of the water feel. That's a couple of small armatures, but all of which I'm going to cover in clay. So I need to make sure to maximize how much I can get out of my clay by maximizing the bulk of my armature and counterweighting it and wrapping it together from the inside so it doesn't keep tipping over. With the bulk of my armature coming together, I make sure to shape little bits and pieces of it, like any limbs or places where anatomy is going to be poking out a little bit, again, to make the most of my clay. I obviously have to make some things up creatively. There's not a huge amount of intimate detail about the design of the creature, but there's enough there that if those points that I read were a design prompt for a commission or a movie or game, I would end up with something like this. Now I have these pieces that I can move to sort of repose him however I want, which I really like, but this is now ready for clay and to dive in the deep end. Before we do that, there's so many crazy monsters in the Bible, so let's explore a few more, shall we? Now as epic as the Leviathan is, there's a lot more, and we're going to do a few more in this video. I'm going to sculpt the Leviathan to completion, but let's draw a behemoth. What is a behemoth? Well, in a vision to Job, God shows him, saying, "Behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins, in his power, in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron." God's like, check this thing out. It is swole. It is tanked. And leaning into that, I wanted to make something that felt like a sentinel of beefy power. And just as a reference, I put in a little shepherd in there so you can see maybe what, let's call him Job, was like looking up at this thing. So that's the behemoth. More to come, but in the meantime, let's get back to sculpting the Leviathan. To sculpt these monsters, there's nothing I like more than sculpting monsters with monster clay. And many of you will have seen me work with this. It starts in a really solid state and ends in a really solid state, but you can whack it in the microwave and turn it into pure liquid. I shouldn't have done that. That was stupid. It's actually a wax-based medium, and it's used in the film and special effects industry to do exactly this. So working in this much more liquidy state to start off with will help me build it all up, and as it sets, I'll be able to add those details. As you can see, it starts really liquidy and I'm really just smearing it on, but over the course of about half an hour, it starts to solidify a little bit, and that's where I can start to bulk up certain areas, blocking out the anatomy and general proportions of my creature. And I figured while this monster would have arms and legs, this is primarily a deep sea serpentine sort of creature. So like a crocodile or alligator, I made little arms that actually turn into sort of weird little claw fin things that I thought were really unique, but also makes sense in the context that he can frolic through mud and leave a chasm in his wake. As for around the body of the creature, being described as having skin-like armor of course mean that I've got this sort of outer hard shell, particularly on the top, like plates of armor and spikes. I actually came across websites that were speculating as to what the Leviathan could be, assuming it was a real creature. The most common guess is that it's a crocodile. Would God himself come down and want to smite a crocodile with a sword? It's not epic enough. It doesn't make sense. So far, I am really happy with how the pieces of my Leviathan flow together. I've got a pretty epic look here. So that's the blocking done. The next step is the detail. But before we do that, let's just check out a couple more biblical creatures. And now we finally arrive to angels. They are not what you think they are. My God. Whoa. Bible's God. Now, believe it or not, there are actually three kinds of angels. The first of the three is called the Malachim. They looked like people. There was really no mention of them having any specifically unique traits. They are not described as having wings. In fact, they're only depicted in art as having wings after the year 400 AD. No wings and no strange design traits to speak of, just messengers. Behold the blackest of all Fridays, where sales distracted people everywhere. The one that people needed to pay most attention to was at the JAZZA'S shop, with 15% off of everything for a limited time. I wasn't quote, that's not in the Bible, that's me telling you to go check out the sale over at JAZZA'S. Get yourself some awesome digital brushes, Photoshop, Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, and more. My in-depth How to Digital Paint guidebook with a huge amount of content showing you the in-depth process of painting digitally like a master, but presented and taught in a way that you can understand and enjoy. And there's loads more over there. Easy anatomy, fun with faces, photo reference packs, merch, and more. And of course, it's a huge support to the channel. And I'm having that sale for a limited time, so don't miss out. Check out the link in the description. Let's get back to the Bible, I guess. Then we have the next level up, and this is where it gets a bit weird, the seraphim. In the Bible, these are attributed as being higher levels of angel, and they're beings that surround the throne of God. Quote, above him were seraphims, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And so with that descriptor and basing it off of the drawing that I had of the other angel, I just added the 6 wings. A set covering the face, a set covering the feet, and a set to fly with. It starts to make sense as to why some of the first things that these angels are depicting to say is fear not or be not afraid, because, you know, if this sort of thing showed up, you'd be like, I need a little comforting right now. And if you think that's pretty full on, wait till you get to the third kind of angel. But hold your horses. Let's get back to the Leviathan. Now my Leviathan is about to really take shape. This stage is really fun. It's very push and pull. I pull clay off, push bits in. As you can see, he's a little bit chubby, and that's intentional because I needed more than enough clay on there that I can start to strip back and carve out some more of that anatomy and those details. This is a process I could just get so lost in. It's the most satisfying part by far, slowly shaving back and revealing the creature within. Not only is it really cathartic, it feels as good as it looks, and slowly unveiling that surface texture or taking those digs into the areas that create a clearer musculature is just really creatively satisfying. Oh, this big boy is ready for some detail, but before we do that, let's enjoy one more creature from the Bible. This one's weird. Now we arrive to the third of the three kinds of angels. This one is the most serious. The Opony, as it's called, is actually the one that guards the throne of God. This was the appearance of the structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all four looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the four directions the creature faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creature went. The rims were high and awesome, and all four rims were full of eyes all around. The long and short of it is, this living creature, this angel, comprised of four interlocking wheels which can face in any direction, honestly to me seems like what's being described is indescribable. It's impossible to really comprehend the physicality of what's being shown here, which is why I've decided to not make any sense with how I interlock them. I'm not keeping depth in mind. I'm not trying to make it rational or reasonable looking. I'm trying to lean more into the indescribable, and the fact that any one of them could be facing in any direction or overlapping either of them. I also went with having the eyes of varying shapes and setting that above the throne of God. It's incomprehensible, and I kind of think that's the point. I mean, if you think that's wild, there's way more where that came from. If you want part 2 to this video, you want to see the Nephilim, dragons, varying creatures of the apocalypse, or cherubim, which are nothing like you picture in your head when I say that, make sure to click like and subscribe and leave a comment, all those things to help the algorithm, and of course, share it. Because if this video gets over 1 million views in the first month of release, I will commit to doing part 2 and bring more of these epic biblical creatures to life. From the Bible, not the dictionary. But I always like to start with the details in the most important place, and in this case, of course, it's the face. For the mouth, I wanted to make sure I could get this needly teeth aesthetic, which is pretty hard with monster clay because when it sets, it can be pretty brittle, and I don't want the teeth to snap off. So instead of placing teeth in one by one, I placed in enough clay to act as the teeth and carved away the gaps between them. That way I'd have the structural strength of the original clay block to hold it all in place. And I have these cool little clear bead things which I can paint the inside of to have a more intense white interior, and then surrounding that with clay and carving out those details can really start to get that monstrous feel. Then it's on through the rest of the piece, carving out the shape of the carapace and the armor and detailing in the skin texture as I go. And that is the end of this epic escapade into biblical creatures. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the wolf. Can we just eat? That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. No, actually, that's enough. Actually, keep it going. We've run out of smoke. All right, we've literally run out of juice right at the end, but we've used every ounce of our juice creatively in this video to entertain you. I hope you've had fun. Let me know in the comments if you want to see some more biblical goodness. Again, this is just lighthearted, playful, focusing on a character design and creature design approach, which I love, and have fun making art. That's what this is all about. Thanks for watching. See you guys.